Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host. And today I am tickled to have my friend Susan Lassiter, CVPM, join me. Susan is one of the few people in this industry who's probably been doing it as long or longer than I have. And she just recently made a job change, and she's working now for Blue Pearl. But prior to that, she has been in the veterinary industry over 34 years. She and her family had practices. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, your mom was one of the original CVPM. So she's a legacy CVPM. She's worked in various positions as management. In 2004, they sold their second practice and moved from Virginia Beach to Georgia, where she has her husband and her kids. And they have a bulldog named Chanel, which we'll share Chanel's picture on your bio too. They restore classic muscle cars, and they root for UGA football. So welcome, Susan, and thank you for joining us on The Bend today.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, since I've known you for a while, I'm going to ask you to tell your origin story. And I gave just a little bit of it, but just because your parents are doing something doesn't necessarily mean that's your goal in life. So tell me about how you ended up in vet med.
Well, I was the boy my dad never had. I wanted to spend time with him, and you want to spend time with dad, you went to work. And so I grew up in the veterinary hospital. My dad was a veterinarian, and I learned very young, watching the years and the intimate role that the team played in success of veterinary practice. People naturally gravitated to me because I could get through to my father better sometimes than they could. And so the team would come to me and say, "Can you talk to your dad about such and such? We want to do such and such." And so I would carefully go in there and talk with him and kind of get him in a better mindset to be accepting of whatever the team wanted, and my mother was busy keeping him happy and keeping the books. And so, and I naturally just by default kind of got involved in that role. And I really, really enjoy it a lot. Continued my education into undergrad organizational leadership and management, and continued leadership, and really learned about servant leadership very early on before it became kind of a trendy word to say. I was deep in it about 10 years before it kind of hit the market, if you will, and really learned the power of that. And that's what brought me here today.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Sometimes I think we do things instinctively just because we think it's the right thing to do. And then we find out there's a name for it, right?
Right, exactly.
That was sort of how I felt about the servant leadership and the first Ken Blanchard book I read. I was like, oh, well, I just thought this was being good to your people. This is what you're supposed to do, is you're supposed to look after your people, and then they look after you. And that's the way my parents raised me in business too. So tell us about, I know you've had some curveballs because like I said, we've been knowing each other for 20 years.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about some of your biggest curveballs.
They've been various throughout my history, changing markets completely. Moving from Virginia to Georgia was a big curveball, because after we sold our last practice, I didn't really want to go to competitive practices and say, "Can I get a job?" It kind of like, yeah, I'll go somewhere else now. We sold our last practice here. And although I'm sure they would have been glad to have me, it's the competitive side of me. And so then coming down to Georgia and actually applying what I was taught and learned and raised, to a practice that wasn't my family's anymore. That was really interesting. And then finding out, okay, I do know what I'm doing besides just working for my family. And that would be another curveball. And then, with raising children and having the demands of many children and keeping up with them, and then keeping up with husband, and those types of things have been curveballs along the way, and life happens. And certainly there's been challenges along the ways with just having children and things that they get into. And then got to a point where I was getting out of moving from one side of Atlanta to moving up more to the north. And that was a whole different curveball, because then now I'm dealing with completely different demographics and dealing with all of the onsets of being in a different market now. And how does that apply? And, or is the client, always looks the same, but now we're talking about different socioeconomic levels, and we're talking about some of the challenges that originally I didn't have to worry about, and now the new curveball is being in a Blue Pearl practice that is amazing, but now I've graduated over from general practice to emergency and specialty care. And so learning all of the aviances with that, and, and there's now also learning that I have two clients, not just the client presented, but we also have the referring veterinarian, and so that's another whole nother relationship
It is
that we have to foster and nurture,
It is. And it's a fine line to walk too, because people just automatically don't want to be at the ER.
Right.
And so they come in with the attitude like, this is going to be expensive. This is not my regular vet. I don't know you people. And overcoming that very quickly is a challenge in emergency, especially medicine. I can remember teaching some classes to ER in Roanoke, Virginia. And one of the technicians says, people always say, who's my regular vet? And he says, but I'm going to treat their animal the same no matter who their regular vet is. I said, but you don't understand. They want the connection. They want to know that you know somebody they know. So the remark should be, oh, yes, we know Dr. So-and-so very well. We work with his patients all the time, because then there's a comfort in that says, oh, they know my vet, and it's not some stranger that they just don't care about or don't know. And he said, it never occurred to me to think that way. And I said, it's all about connections. It's all about making people feel comfortable. And ER, they're already frazzled. They start out frazzled. It's not like a visit. Yeah. So it is different and very challenging. So I think, knowing, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't know if you are willing to talk about this a little bit, because I think it's the most frightening thing for me in watching you go through it, was when your son was shot and almost died.
Yes.
And tell me about that incident for you, and how you just you were just powerful warrior for him, going through that whole episode. And I was so proud of how brave you were, but thought, oh my gosh, that's got to be a nightmare.
Oh yes, most definitely. It is very, you get the phone call, a parent never wants, and you're trying to make sense of it, and you go through so many different emotions, and you do what you can do. It was 2.5 years he was in the hospital, and he coded 4 times and came back, and 17 surgeries later, and it was a good month and a half before my team had even known it had happened, because I was not going to let them know, that I had something like that I was dealing with, because it changes the relationship. So now though, they don't want to come to you as much, because they feel like you have so much on your plate. So I was not going to let that happen.
Yeah. So they didn't even know that was going on. Wow.
I wouldn't let them. Yeah, I wouldn't let them know for a long time.
Wow. I'm even more impressed with you that you did not, because I would immediately, when I found out I had breast cancer, I went back and told my whole team, and they went, we got you, girl. And I went, okay. That
yeah.
Support,
I didn't want my team to know, because naturally in veterinary medicine, to our own detriment, sometimes we love so hard, and I didn't want the team, not to come to me, or just like I said, I don't want them to feel like, oh, I can't go to her because, of this or that. And I'm always, no matter what I'm going through, I literally could be, burning down, and be like, how can I help you? That's just me, like I said, it's to my own detriment
Yeah.
sometimes. But I just really believe in being everything that you can possibly be to the team,
Mhm.
and I wasn't going to let that area of my life, um, shadow. I naturally had to tell my boss at the time and his wife just so that they knew, but I only missed about 4 days, out of all of that. And I would work during the day, and then I'd go home at night and sleep at the hospital and get up and come back to work, and that was just my life, and that's what I did. And I powered the Lord knows, me, I prayed hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we
Yeah.
made it through, and he's thriving and well enough now to get on my nerves again.
It's back to being a boy again, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, being a young male in Atlanta is a whole nother set of challenges. So
Exactly. It-
especially when you're someone that's, in the forefront and in the music industry
yeah,
and
because
has made it.
now tell me, he's a musician, right? He's
Yes, he's an artist on his own label, and he
yeah,
also has a label. So
yeah.
he signs artists, and he's an artist on the label.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
So obviously, very impressive young man that survived all that and came out to
Yeah,
truly, truly thrive. And then you have your daughters, who are absolutely stunning.
thank you.
They look like supermodels, both of them. And so I'm sure that you and your husband are pulling your hair out with those girls, because
Hmm.
probably boys knocking down the door all the time.
Yes.
So tell me about overcoming fear, because I think this is
Hmm.
something that I think is our biggest challenge in life, is when anything is different and new, and you've changed jobs, and I know, because
Hmm.
like one of them I kind of manipulated to get you where I wanted you to be working for a clinic, and then now you've changed jobs again, because for a while you were gonna manage and do your stuff with your family. You went, okay, no,
Hmm.
I'm going back.
Yeah, that lasted 3 months.
I saw that.
It
No,
was,
that
I
makes
really
sense.
thought for sure, my son kept pulling me and said, Mom, I really need you to work for me. I need you to work for me. And he had lots of different his hand, and I was really helping him to develop a portfolio that was larger than music, if you will, because as he says, he's not going to be hot forever. So he's smart enough to realize that he's good, because he's extremely good looking,
Yeah,
but he does realize that goes away at some point,
it's fleeting. Yeah.
and so he has different revenue opportunities. And so I took a kind of a timeout. It was a perfect time actually for me. I was kind of growing a little frustrated, if you will. The being in a I was in a at the time I was in a joint venture practice with a corporation, and the JV model is interesting. The positives of it is the fact that you do have better resources, to take care of your associates and to be able to get equipment and those types of things. The challenge that a JV model brings to our world is that you kind of everybody thinks they're your boss, and so that's a really big challenge, because the veterinarian who still owns 49% thinks that they're the boss, and then the corporation thinks that they're the boss, and you kind of get in this kind of weird kind of spiral, and I was kind of caught in some of that. Also, nobody was paying attention. When I say nobody, I'm saying neither boss were paying attention to the need of the associates,
Mhm.
and to me that's always first and foremost.
Mhm.
We cannot do our job without them.
No.
And
And right now,
I am
it's so hard to find.
Yes. And in the practice that I joined, there were a lot of culture issues, which it always seems, it's funny that we talk, because Debbie, you've known this my entire career. It's every job that I go in, it's because it's broken. The culture is broken. They need someone
Exactly.
to come in and fix it, right?
Right.
And so I come in and I fix it, and then and it's great, and does great for everybody. And then I fix it so well that I get bored, and then
Exactly.
I go to the next challenge, and I
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
career move has been a promotion, if you will, if you
Mhm.
look at the monetary value
Mhm.
behind it, but it also are bigger and bigger challenges,
Mhm. Yeah.
and so the challenge with this was I was kind of at a point to where I really wasn't feeling it. Like, for example, if I were a pie, 1/3 of me would be for the associates, 1/3 of me is for the organization, and 1/3 of me is for the clients and the patients. And I keep all of that very well balanced, and I feel like I have to.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever one is going more into the other, then it doesn't fit right, And so I just felt like it was a good time for me to take a step back. And I was going to retire originally, and help my son. And that went really well. And that didn't take very long at all to set the structure for that, to the point to where, I have everything on QuickBooks, can do that at night, on the weekends, have the structure for him to be able to be mindful and help him understand some of the bigger picture of his businesses. And then my husband really kind of as the workforce, if you will, to kind of keep everything going and navigate a lot of the little things that need to be done every day that he's good at. Then I got to the point where people were starting to expect dinner 3 times a day. And what? No, this is not what this is about. I am a great working mom.
To be the cook and the bottle washer, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a great working mom. My hands off to the people that can stay home every day and take care of it. The only way I could stay home is if I had unlimited resources or made them to cook. That is not me.
That is not you.
That's not me. I'm the mom to help you do your homework, and read the book at night. I'm not the mom that helps you put makeup on and plan cupcakes. That's not me.
That's not you. That's great.
So, I'll buy you the cupcakes. We'll buy really pretty cupcakes. I'm not the one who's going to help you make them.
Yeah. Take you to the salon for the makeup, and then
right.
Get back to
I'll make sure you have your appointment. I'll make sure to get you there on time. But I'm not the one
that's going to do
it. Right.
Oh,
so then this opportunity came up, and so then this opportunity interested me because somebody had really wanted me to do this for a while. So they found me out of retirement, hit me up on LinkedIn and said, hey, this job would be great for you. You would be a manager's manager. And I said, fantastic. This is really cool. This would be fun because I absolutely love teaching people how to manage. And, I feel like there's a lot of old schoolers, if you will, like you and I, us lifers.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of little steps that are huge that get missed, in today's world. And so I like to bring those back to the table. So
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think I read a stat one day, and I know you'll totally get it. Like 51% of managers in all businesses, not just veterinary business, have no formal management training whatsoever. They were just good at whatever they were good at and got promoted. And then they were expected to perform. And all that happened was they just failed, and then they were floundering around doing the best that they could. And then that's where the culture goes, right? Because if you're just looking at numbers and you're not looking at the culture of your hospital and growing your people and training them appropriately and, weeding out the dead wood and watering those that really want to bloom, then the whole thing falls apart. So it's, and maybe they model the poor management that they had. So it's sort of like abusive relationships when you have an abusive parent as a child, and then you become an abusive parent when you have children, because that's what the model is, or that's what So
absolutely,
we keep trying to get the message out there about taking care of the people, and the money will show up. Not that you don't monitor the money, but the people are the key. This is kind of one of my fears with a lot of investment money coming into our world, is that we are going to be managed by numbers people, by people who care about animals. And not necessarily that the people who care about animals are that great business people, because they're not necessarily, but there's a balance between the two that I think is really important. And I think that's what we need to focus on. And that's what you and I have spent our careers working with and towards, is to make sure that there is a good balance between those two things. So let's talk about the decision-making process that you were I mean, you were retired. Obviously, the decision that said I'm hungry 3 times a day, that helped your process. But what made you decide to say this is going to be? Because I'm sure that if you had put the word out that you wanted a job, you would have been
Mhm.
inundated with lots of opportunities, and probably you are. What made you pick this one?
Well, their offer was good.
That helps.
Made it worth my while, which is always important. Um, Also long term, I felt like if I was going to commit again, that this needed to be something that had a lot of upward mobility, more than just a regular practice. I wanted to be able to be part of my re-engagement was to be recommitted to the cause, if you will, of making sure that there are great managers being cultivated to be able to handle the challenges. It's just like you said, I feel very passionately about the same, making sure that, yes, we have to pay attention to the money. The money is important. I mean, I love money as much as the next person, and it takes it for us to be able to reinvest and to be a profitable organization, but I also want to make sure that we are taking excellent care of the people. So many people are leaving the industry, and it's not just because of COVID, that kind of is a crutch that people have been using. Well, because of COVID, well, no, not
Yeah,
really. It's been going
really.
on a long time, and we're finally starting to see salaries that are comparable to what people need to be earning, and we're finally starting to see it turn a little bit. And I would say that's the good side about bringing financial people, bigger investors in, because they understand people have to be able to take care of their families,
Mhm.
and it's not as much people working for the doctor that's attached to for 20 years and that they just sacrifice for the good of all, that people understand that people need to have a good income.
Mhm.
That's another reason why I chose this company as well, because they do pay very well, and that I knew I would have an opportunity to be able to move the needle forward
Mhm.
and for the greater good of all.
Yeah.
And another reason I chose this company is because it is in touch with so many different levels of the relationship,
Mhm.
and being part of the Mars family to me is huge, because that is a real stage to be able to touch thousands and thousands of
Mhm.
people, you know, by all the different programs that they have and their commitment to really develop great leaders. That was very encouraging to
Mhm.
me to see their leadership program,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It's,
and
it's a powerful company. Years and years ago, when I first started consulting, I was doing work for Greenies, and Greenies is actually owned by the Mars Company. And I
Mhm.
was really disappointed that they didn't have M&Ms at our meeting. I was thinking, sure, they would have that at our
Yeah,
meetings.
yeah.
But I think there is advantage of scale, because if you think about benefits and how challenging it is for a small practice to afford an insurance policy for its
Mhm.
employees compared to somebody who has 100,000 employees, and the
Right.
insurance policy risk that's goes over a corporation that large is a tremendous benefit to the employees. And
Mhm.
the buying power of scale is also a
Mhm.
challenge, and it
Mhm.
is very difficult for a small practitioner to do that. I don't think that's impossible, because I do think that small
Right.
practitioners who are unique and boutique can absolutely reach a very specific market
Mhm.
of pet owners, and we see those pet owners becoming more and more prevalent. The ones who
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
looking for a furry pediatrician,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
than just a veterinarian, and they
Mhm.
want to take extraordinary care of their pets.
Mhm.
And so I think
Mhm.
that might be the place for the small independent niche practitioner to be in the future for those kind of pet owners.
Mhm.
um, what do you consider to be your biggest career mistake?
That's a great question. My biggest career mistake, I think, not having enough confidence in myself to push things forward that I may have just kind of, there are things in my career that I wish at that time I would have not I would have stayed stable on my ground, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense.
Mhm.
Um, knowing who I am now and knowing the power of influence that a good person can bring,
Mhm.
that I think that had I gone back to probably one of my first practices in Georgia, I would have done that completely different.
Mhm.
And I kind of put up with too much for too long.
Mhm.
And so I think that kind of took me to a place where I never want to be again.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who work in veterinary medicine who are in positions like that who say, well, I just won't rock the boat, or I'll
Mhm,
just deal with it, and I
mhm.
was just reading something yesterday about non-competes, and this veterinarian who had a 10-mile non-compete, although she was miserable where she was working, and she said, well, I guess I'll just go to work and be miserable and deal with it.
Right.
And we do tend to do that because it's so inconvenient to make the
Mhm.
change. Um,
Right.
and it's a little frightening. In fact, it's a lot
Mhm,
frightening to make those big
mhm.
changes. But yeah, I think if we use that logical, smart part of our brain that says, let me just walk through this step by step. And what's the worst thing that could happen? Um,
Right.
I often, when I'm teaching veterinarians and teams, I'll make them say the word no out loud.
Mhm.
And I'll say, do it again. And they'll do it 3 different times. And of course, by then they're looking at me like I'm insane. And I said, now look around. And they look, I'm like, what? I went, nobody died. So the
Mhm.
word no is not going to kill you, but the answer is
Mhm.
always no if you don't ask. So why not
Right.
ask? Why not ask? Um, and I think that's how we make the movements in our career too, because
Mhm.
I can remember going to my boss asking for a raise. And he
Mhm.
finally just said, you know what, I'm tired of you asking me for money every year. We're going to make this arrangement. And so I'm going to pay you a percentage of the income of this practice. And the more money we make, the more money you make. And we don't have to talk about it anymore. I went, that works for me.
Yes.
Let's go, let's go. So,
Right.
it's sometimes, but you have to be brave enough to take the risk. That's
Right.
the other thing too. So that, was I willing to take the risk that maybe I wasn't going to be making a whole lot more because I didn't have control of the income.
Mhm.
But it worked out that I did, that I actually did
Mhm.
by putting the
Mhm.
systems in place and the people in place that allowed them to flourish, and then the practice flourished too. Going forward, I guess looking back on those mistakes that you make,
Mhm.
how did you change the way you approach things now?
Now I keep a log. I journal a lot more about the achievements that I've been able to make along the way. It's very hard when you're in your day-to-day grind of things to remember all the wins that you have, you know, and realizing the different intimate details that, although not tangible, like on the surface, they don't know. They don't know all of the work that you're doing behind the
Mhm.
scenes. And so I'm much more vocal about talking about it at the appropriate meetings and forums.
Mhm.
This is how this was before I came on board. This is where we are now, and kind of putting value to talking about that and acknowledgement, kind of learning how not to toot your own horn too much, but to toot it at the right time,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that way people are noticing that, because they have, like, people also, they wonder, what does the manager do all day?
Right.
Like,
That is so true. And I agree with you so much, because I used to stay after work and we closed at 6 o'clock, and there'd be nights I was there till 10 o'clock doing
yes,
projects that you just couldn't do with people coming in out asking questions.
right.
And, or the computers had to be shut down. And I don't even
Mhm.
know how many New Year's Eves I spent before Cornerstone would allow you to not
Yes.
shut down the computer the night of and close out the year end. That was my New Year's Day, was every
Mhm.
year in the clinic. And people don't know that you're doing that kind of stuff. So you really, and it's not the people who are above you, it's the
Mhm.
people who are below you that need to know that stuff too, because they do think
Mhm.
you're just sitting in that office all day long, twiddling your thumbs and working on the computer, when they're busting their hump picking up 150-pound dogs. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
the only time they ever realized what I was doing for sure is the day I wrote payroll. So nobody
Mhm.
bothered me.
Yeah, it's funny how they'll leave you alone.
There are no questions on payroll day. Things will get managed to get handled until you get those paychecks written and handed
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a really excellent tip for managers, is just to
Mhm.
make sure that your people know what you're doing and how it affects
Mhm.
their lives too, because
Mhm.
so much of the work is just confidential.
Mhm.
It's hidden, it's with outside vendors. It's just running
Mhm.
numbers and finding out data. There's so much that happens behind the scenes when you manage well. Now, in some practices I've been in, I'm telling none of that stuff is happening. It's just a
Right.
free-for-all back there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So let's talk about networking, because that's one of the things that I'm so adamant that people who want to
Mhm.
move up in their career develop a great network. And I think you and I are a good example, because we do go back a long way. And I don't even remember the first time we met. It was maybe a
Mhm.
Georgia meeting, maybe, I don't even know, maybe you attended a
Mhm.
class. But we've kept in contact for
Yes.
20 years.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So I think that's really, really an important part of
Mhm.
the growth of any career,
Mhm.
is to
Mhm.
develop a good network. So tell me, in your changes, and obviously somebody reached out to you on LinkedIn for this opportunity that you have right
Yes.
now. How does networking work for you? And, even looking at, your husband's business, your son's business, the work that you do outside of veterinary medicine, I'm
Mhm.
sure there's a network there.
Mhm. There is. It's my dad taught me a long time ago, it's 50% of who you know and 50% of what you know, and so I've always kind of been mindful of that. And I've never known a stranger. My mom would tell you when I was 2 years old in the grocery cart, I was trying to talk to somebody, you know. That's been to my advantage. And I'm very active in the local managers group here, and with Georgia, we're fortunate to have a fantastic managers
Yes, you
group.
do. You have a great managers group.
We do. We really do. And, Judy and Lisa and Donna and we adore each other outside as well, but that's been a huge thing for me. And then also there was a point in time where I got invited to be on the GVMA wellness board. And I was the only practice manager at that time that was invited to do that. And that was a huge opportunity. Since then I haven't been able to do that like I used to, but at that time in my life, it was really good. And that was another networking opportunity because now I'm with a bunch of veterinarians who had never known, me or knew what all practice management, how well it had evolved to. So that's been big. And then it's funny because I kind of learned organically. My mother was big network person, and as I was coming up through management and knowing the people that she knew and being her daughter, naturally people, they already know you. They've heard the stories, hopefully all good by the time they've met you, and then that kind of just lays a foundation. And it's really fun because there's a lot of people that she was really good friends with that I'm now good friends with, like Phil Siebert and gosh, there's so many that I could just rattle off that, seem so far out of reach at my time, out of my league, but now they're just, regular people to
Mhm,
me, and that's just really cool. My first mentor, I was very lucky with Shelley Johnson,
mhm.
and the VHMA so long ago. I mean, that's who I got paired up with, and she was just a practice manager at the time, and I mean, those types of and responsibilities. I mean, those relationships to me are a responsibility. Like I knew to always, always keep good friends with Debbie Boone because she's a mover and a shaker. And always make sure you stay friends with movers and the shakers, and you were one of them. So mine was kind of selfish because I knew it was good for my career. And
Uh,
then the second part was I really like you.
oh, well,
So
I like you too. So yeah, so it's
we have a
and
similar background,
yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. We grew up in family businesses. Of course, mine was
Hmm.
restaurant and then the animal
Hmm.
stuff, and managed for such a long time in this profession. And I think one of the greatest things for me was being so lucky in my first
Hmm.
job in the veterinary profession. It was working for a hospital that had the groundwork laid by a great consultant, because Owen
Hmm.
McCafferty was our consultant.
Wow.
And I just had a conversation last week with Owen, which is, it's just wonderful for me because he watches me on Facebook and he says, I'm so proud of you, Deb. And I went, oh my gosh, if it hadn't been for you and Dr. Cobb, I would have never been able to do this stuff because that was how I was taught to do it right. And I know that so many managers get into really poorly run hospitals and don't have the training and don't have the leverage. I mean, I was just allowed to do. And I think that was one of the big things because, it got to the point where it was better to ask forgiveness than permission. And I just
I understand that. I very much understand
that takes some time and some trust with your employer to do that. And I think a lot of times people are afraid again to go out on a limb and say, I know this is the right thing to do, and I'm just going to do it. And then when, you and I, we will do it now. We will just say,
right.
This is the right thing to do.
Oh, most definitely. I've done my own damage control.
Yeah. Yeah. And say, we're
going. I've definitely said, I know this isn't the perfect thing to do. This is what needs to be done. And I'm going to do it. And then, like you said, I'm going to ask for forgiveness, but everyone's going to see once it's done. It's, I rip the scabs off.
That's right. Yeah. I was right. You should listen. And then, as time goes on and you do that more and more, then you become more and more autonomy. I have more and more autonomy. I think a lot of times, especially with new managers, they'll get very frustrated and say, my boss won't let me do anything. And we're like, but does it know that you can? So you have to take little wins and you have to shine light on those little wins and then chip away at that to say, you know what, I really do know what I'm doing. I really can do this thing. And then eventually they go, oh gosh, just do it. My boss moved to Florida the last 6 months before he retired. He wasn't even in the building. So just ran the practice.
Absolutely.
And that's the way it's supposed to happen, right? That's the doctors make the veterinary decisions and make the medicine, and the managers take care of everything else. And that's the way it's supposed to happen. And trust but verify, big advocate for trust but verify, but
absolutely
you can't just turn them loose and not look, but you ought to be able to turn them loose and then monitor and appropriate time. So Susan, what advice would you give somebody who's facing a big career decision or big things happening in life, having to make a choice, a kind of a little scary, it's new and shiny and I don't know about it choice?
I would tell them to make sure they've done their homework. Sometimes things that are presented aren't always exactly what you think that they are, and just like when as employers, we check references. I think when you're a candidate, you need to check references as well. Look at previous managers, have conversations. Now that social networking is so easy, it wasn't like when you and I were coming up. Now I would tell managers that have that luxury to say, oh, well, let me just send a message to this previous manager, and you don't have to say a lot. You can just ask open-ended questions, very professional, tactful questions, maybe, 2 or 3. What are some of the, I see that you no longer work here. You want to tell me about that? Just question mark. You're not throwing mud, you're finding out, I think that's huge before you make a big career jump, making sure that if you're changing locations, making sure you understand what the logistics of that really are. Oftentimes I see people move to areas that they thought, oh, it's quieter, it's more rural, I'm going to like it. And then you're like, no, I hate it. It's miserable. I don't have any connection. Making sure that you really understand where you're going to be living. And then also making sure that you looked into the community, and making, there's a lot of different communities. One thing I've had to do with living in Georgia, I mean, even in today's time with having biracial children, is making sure that the community that I live in is supportive of that, and I think that's important. Look at your family. What is this going to be a good move for not just you, but for your family too? Where I'm moving, are they going to be accepting, or are we going to have to go through challenges? And if they are, and your family's still on board, that's okay, but have those conversations early before you're all in, and now you're kind of stuck, So I would say just make sure you do your homework.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think of course, you and I both know from hiring young associates, A lot of times they look at equipment or the new building, or somebody's talking a big game about mentorship and teaching them. And then they get into that practice and they're not allowed to do anything. There's no
Yes.
mentorship whatsoever. The equipment sits there gathering dust because nobody knows how to do it and nobody's going to learn how to do it. And they become miserable. And then the same thing for money. I know sometimes there's big bonuses being offered right now, and it's hard to look at that money and go, oh, I want it. But what you have to realize, those are really not bonuses. Those are loans.
Right.
And if you are miserable and you want to quit, you have to pay that back. So there's, again, that financial heads up is like, what is the actual deal here? And that's, and gosh, find advisors. There's
Right.
really good advisors available to veterinarians and for managers. And we have the Veterinary Hospital Managers Association, which has just been so important to my career.
Oh my goodness. I wouldn't know.
I mean,
absolutely
what would we
huge.
do without them? Well, and
I don't even know, to be honest with you. I really have no idea what I would have done without the VHMA.
Yeah. So many managers who still don't have membership there.
See that they don't.
Yeah. It's such a, oh my gosh, it's such a fantastic forum to have your questions answered. And even and there's such a generosity. The managers are extremely generous with documents and knowledge and workarounds. And I think that was one of the things that I was so impressed with all during COVID, is how the managers came together and said, okay, here's the workaround for this, and here's this document for this, and here's how we did our parking lot, and all that collaboration. I don't know if it happened in other professions the way it worked for us, but man, everybody was trying to help. Everybody was really trying to help. And
everybody helps everybody, and that's the thing that I've just enjoyed so much about the VHMA. I mean, it's one of my lifelines, Debbie Hill. I mean, she's just awesome, and I mean, there's just Susie Crockett. I mean, there's just so many people that, have influenced me, and I've never even been to my practice, but, watching what they're doing and knowing what they're, what works for them, and knowing like, okay, great. If she's done this, I'm going to try it. I may make it a little different, here, but I'm going to apply it, yes, absolutely. That is huge. All of those relationships and all of the mentorship, all those people. I mean,
well, we, the Patterson instructors, and of course, Shelley Johnson is one of, she's our lead guru now, but we still have a little group, even though COVID has stopped us from being on the road. We have what we laughingly call our smart people group, and we will have conversations with each other and go, hey, have you ever seen this? And everybody's like, no. And Debbie Hill is like, oh my God, I love Debbie. It's the most dry sense of humor. I can't wait to get her on my podcast.
Oh my gosh. I know. I told my group, I actually have this group of people that we have a closed private message Facebook group. We have so much fun because it truly is a vent session, and we might throw something on in the middle of the night. We don't care what time it is in their time zone, it's whoever. And it consists of myself and Melissa and Andrea Crabtree, and oh, they'll kill me. I don't remember everyone. Christina Cecina and Addie Blair. Yeah, there's a bunch of us up there. Yeah, there's tons of us. And and that has been huge, and I told them I was going to be up here, be with you today. And they were like, oh my gosh, have so much fun. But it's just, I couldn't make it without them. Like literally
it's important to have your tribe. And I think that is exactly, what helps us all, in our career, in our decision making. And even if you have, a tribe of friends, I have a couple. I have, of course, some managers, my smart people group, and then I have a group, we call ourselves the Hens. And everybody once a month we will get together, and we're all in the veterinary profession, but there's 2 attorneys and one is an insurance executive, and we just have conversations about what's happening, with us personally, but also out there in the world, and are able to bring interesting perspectives because, everybody's lived experience is different.
Mhm.
And what you can bring to the table is going to be a different viewpoint. And it's really wonderful to have other people who look at it from
Yes,
industry out there and say, oh, I didn't think about it from the repercussions on that side of the table or this side of the table. Uh,
right.
Very fascinating. And of course, Vet Partners, the Association of Consultants and
Mhm.
Advisors, which I am lucky enough to be president of this year,
Yes,
is
that's so
another
cool.
another good group of advisors. And we
Mhm,
can just
mhm.
reach out to. It's fun to have Karen Felstead call you up and go, hey, did you see
Yes,
that? You're like, "Huh." It still kind of thrills me a little bit when Karen calls me. I'm like,
absolutely. Oh man, I remember the first time I went to one of her lectures, and she had alphabet soup behind her name then, and I was just like, she's amazing. And now to be on a different level, and be able to, if I needed to, I could send her a message and she would
uh-huh.
respond, and I wanted to tell you something really funny one time when it was at one of the VHMA meetings, and Shelly Johnson and we were laughing so hard. We could not get ourselves together, and we were supposed to be like being so professional about a certain situation. Like it was a round table or something, and like the whole room was like ready, and we were just like gut wrenching laughing. We could not get ourselves together, and we're like, we are the leaders in this room, and we
We are losing it.
we were
But
losing it.
that's what makes it fun, right? And I think that, that's the thing. I have managers who will just reach out to me randomly, and me, I'm going to help you if I can.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of people are afraid to come up and talk to the people who are at the
Yes.
lectern or the people who write the articles. But we're just people, man. We just
Mhm.
are. And I love it when people come up and talk to me and say, I learned something from you, or what you taught me really helped me in this situation, because that is what I do it for. And I
Yes.
love to hear those stories. So if you're, if anything I do has helped you and you want to tell me about it, I'm all
Oh
ears.
my gosh. I can go way back. I remember the first time I attended one of the very first classes that you ever gave, as far as that I got exposure to. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she's so relatable, and things that she's, you know, done it this way, it's got to be the right way, and sharing that, your trials and tribulations, and and you knowing that the mistakes that you've made, save me from making those same mistakes,
That's that's
so.
what it's there for. I mean, I've confessed my
Mhm,
sins, like, oh man, I screwed up. And I laughingly have told people, I'm up here supposed to be teaching communication, and the
mhm.
client was being so difficult. And I was like 29 years old. I just had my first job in animal hospital, and she was bitching about $20. And finally I just had enough, because it was about an exam. She didn't want to pay. We gave a cortisone injection. And back in the day when you get the flea shots, right?
Yeah, right.
And I finally just had it, and I looked at her piece of paper, and it was that, like, just one sheet of hardly anything on it except injection, injection, injection. I went, lousy client, right? I went to the copier, I made a copy of it, I slid this piece of paper across the counter, and I said, lady, I won't kill your dog for $20. And if you want to, you need to go somewhere else. We all
Oh,
do it. I just happen to have done it. And I wouldn't do it today. Hopefully I would have better skill set, but she had gotten on my last nerve. And of
I
course,
understand.
social media, I would have been burned alive probably.
Yeah, I know.
And
That's a whole nother 2 hours, right?
it's true. It is true. But I don't believe in being afraid of stuff. And I have said
Mhm.
stuff that I believe is my truth. And if you don't like it,
Right.
oh well,
Yeah. Oh,
I'll,
well.
oh well. Because
Yes.
you can't go through life being afraid to have an opinion.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and I think being authentic is much more important than going through life being very milk toast. And my mother used to say when I was a child, if you don't want to know, don't ask her, because she will tell you.
That's the truth.
Not always a good thing. So I've tried to become more tactful as I've gotten older, but I still believe that honesty is the best policy, but you can do it with grace and kindness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's the southern part of me, is let's do it with
Right.
grace, and let's give a little grace out there in the world too.
Absolutely. And that's when you give, use the sandwich theory. You can learn these theories that like you and I talked about, we were already doing them. They just have names now, but and that's very true in my current position. When I came here, it was, there were so many things that needed to be done, and I put all of it on hold because there was a major culture issue. And I said, this is the dinosaur in the room, and I don't do dinosaurs, so but now we're almost 90 days past, and there's so much laughter, and like the weight has just been lifted in this practice, and it's amazing, and it's a different place, and that makes me feel really good. Not for the associates, not just as a personal win, but to know that there has been that much movement, that quick. And it was interesting because I have, people obviously above me, and I had one of my pretty important people say, we have never seen in our history, their history of being with Blue Pearl, that as much momentum and movement that you've been able to get done in this short amount of time, and they want to come down and visit and drill down on that and find out, how was I able to make that change so quickly in a practice that's needed it for so long, and so that's going to be probably a whole day, of talking about that. But some of it are just the very basic principles like you and I are talking, it's just understanding. And so and I have to quit everything to the real world, because I think I'm really funny. So I said, well, basically, I said, this is how it is. I have a dog on the table. His name is Culture, right? And everybody around wants to talk about the weight or the joints, but there's a large mass on this dog, and it's killing this dog. But nobody wants to talk about that because it's really scary. So I'm the doctor who's going to come in. I'm going to dissect that mass. I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to pull it off piece by piece. And there's going to be some pain from the growth and the healing process. But once we get through all of that, the dog's going to live. And so that's the important part. The dog's going to live, and then I can address the weight and the joints. And when I thought of that explanation, and being this early in my career as far as emergency and specialty care, they could relate to that, and they understand that, So all of these management task things that need to be done, and all of the reports and all of that, yes, I still get those done, but I am not going to be able to get any real movement in management until the culture is fixed.
Exactly.
And so I put everything on hold, and now I'm to the point where I can go back now and pick up other topics and do other things within this clinic that before there was absolutely no way it was going to go.
Right. Right. And even if you tried it, it was going to get torn down because the culture wasn't ready for it.
It wasn't ready for it.
It wasn't ready for it. And I've worked with hospitals who have problems, and I've like you, I'm the fixer, right? Gone in to fix it. And it's funny, sometimes you can just get rid of one person.
Yes.
And the veil lifts, and the tension goes away, and all of a sudden there's light, and there's laughter, and there's relief. Because, and even if it was and the hard part is this really talented person, the one who's been there and has the skills, and you finally just have to say it's not worth it because they have to go. And and maybe they've gotten into a mental place where they can't get out of their own negative box. As managers, I always kept a box of Kleenex and an empty chair in my room. But we cannot say that we are therapists. We're not therapists, and this is a lot of the stuff is above our pay grade. But we have to protect the majority of our team, make resources available to people like EAPs. But that's not what you do. What you do is protect everybody, the whole team, develop the culture, and create an environment where people can't wait to walk in the door instead of running to get the hell out.
Most definitely. That's exactly what I said. I said, I really want, because the work is not the problem. People know what the job entails, and I've had to teach a lot of things very quickly. It's kind of like, in education, when you go through and you learn math and science and English, you learn it every single year, but you learn it more and more and more. And that's kind of like where it is with management, and so now, you learn a little bit more, and each year you learn it more in depth, more in depth, more in depth. And now I'm kind of like at graduate school, because I'm at this practice 200 plus, just here, and just so much. And it's just, people have to understand that people don't fail people, systems fail people,
Mhm.
and making sure that leaders in the practice understand that systems fail.
Mhm.
Nobody wakes up at the beginning of the day and says, how can I screw up today?
Exactly right.
They
Yeah.
don't, that's not what people do,
Mhm.
and if someone's failing and struggling, it's usually always training,
Yeah.
and then you start peeling the layers back, but and then I had a lot of those different situations here, and then of course there wasn't a manager in place for a long time too. So that was really tough on the practice too, but now it's just being able to, people can feel like, okay, they're engaged, they're happy to come to work, and it makes such a huge difference.
I
Such a
read
huge.
I read something the other day that I thought was so enlightening to me, because when we get into these situations, we have people who are, when they get really stressed, they start to bully and push, and they
Mm-hmm.
overcompensate for their stress. And then you have people who get into stressful situations and they fall apart. They undercompensate. They become
Mm-hmm.
screw ups. And so
Mhm,
if we can figure out what's stressing either of those in either direction, the bully stops the bullying because they don't feel like they have to overcompensate. And the screw up quits screwing up because they don't feel like that they're constantly
mhm,
going to be bombarded with failure.
mhm,
Then
mhm,
we put an environment in place where both of them can flourish. And then we also teach them to understand what they do,
mhm.
because that's the other part, is teaching them to understand their own selves
Right.
and have that wisdom to step back and
Mhm,
go, ooh, what is this false story that my
mhm,
brain is telling me about Jane or John or whoever
mhm.
I'm working with? That's a lie, because most of the time it
Right.
really is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the one thing I've learned, even more so recently in the last 2 years, that hurt people hurt,
Hmm.
and people are broken, and when people, when you can acknowledge that from a leadership standpoint and really depersonalize, a lot of the behaviors,
Hmm.
and I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan. I've been preaching systems thinking approach for so long, but it's been one of my, one of the most important skills that I learned was the systems thinking approach,
Hmm.
and understanding that when someone's broken or someone's hurt, that's when they're lashing out, and if you can get to the core of that, as long as it's something that you're able to, but like you said, you also have to watch yourself and be mindful that you are providing resources, and because people will take up your time. And unfortunately, it's the ones, C and below, if they were getting a grade in school, that take up the most time. And then the A plus students don't get the time that they deserve,
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to fix that. Another big important thing with management too, that I've always felt it was very useful, that I learned a skill, was being able to come into a practice, and this is my consulting hat too, but being able to come into a practice and identify the untitled leaders,
Hmm.
right? Because there are people that are running these practices that they don't have the title, but they're really running the
They
practice,
are. They are. They're by
you know?
default. Everybody goes to them. They're the person.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
one of the things that, yeah, like you, when I do consulting, I'll say, who are they?
Right.
They probably do need the title. And some of the people who have the title got it because they were just there a long time. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily good at their jobs. They just exist.
Right.
Existing does not make you a leader. It just makes you
No.
persistent. You're just there.
Exactly. And I'm famous for saying, longevity is rewarded with PTO and 401k. Just because you've worked here 20 years does not mean that it's a great thing. What have you done in those 20 years? That's a whole nother
Oh, it
day.
is. It is. And, I went into a practice and there was a person there who was a receptionist, and she'd been there 25 years. And she was extremely resentful of other people who were getting promotions and who were, getting better pay. And although she had good benefits and she had pretty decent pay for what she was doing. And I said, well,
Hmm.
what are you doing more than you did 20 years ago? And the answer was
Hmm.
nothing. And she refused to do any more than what she was doing 20 years ago. So she was getting cost of living, but she wasn't doing anything more to
Right.
warrant any more responsibility or any more pay because she didn't want to. She just
I know,
stay in that role.
right. And that, and I've even had, doctors have said, I've worked at that, place for 20 or 15 years, 20 years. I'm like, and you've been paid very well for that, and not to take away the human aspect of that, but, there is accountability in that. What have you done? One of the questions that I always like to ask are, what value have you added to yourself? And I had a kennel guy one time. He was the sweetest man. And he just was one of those people that just really loved working in the kennel. And we have to have those type of people, and so when I asked him what's something that you can do, what's something that we can, let's push you a little bit. Let's get you motivated. Let's do something to engage you. And I said, is there anything you've ever wanted to do? And he said, yeah, I've always wanted to play guitar. And I said, okay. I said, you let me know how much it costs and we'll talk about it. So he went and he found out, and it was $300 for him to play guitar. And so I had to figure out how I was going to go to my very thrifty veterinarian at the time.
A very thrifty veterinarian. Imagine that.
And try to validate why I was going to pay $300 for this man's guitar lessons. So I came up with an idea. I said, I know what? This was at the very beginning of all the kind of exclusive puppy daycare, that was just kind of right on that. Competitors were starting to have more lavish experience, with boarding and things. And I said, I know what? So I went to my doctor and I said, we're going to pay for his guitar lessons, and these are the reasons why. And I gave him the bullet points because that was him. And I said, and if you're sitting there wondering why are we going to pay for this man to have guitar lessons, I said it's because he's going to play the guitar every night after he puts the pets to bed, and we're going to videotape that, and we're going to say that we may not have the. And I told my doctor, I said, because you don't want to spend a whole lot of money in a kennel. We know that.
Yeah.
So why don't we at least let them have a lullaby at night,
Oh.
And the guy he was thrilled. It was only a short term, thing, but that just goes at the very basic level that it was life changing for him.
Absolutely. Well, there's no reason why we can't do little things like that for people that make their lives better. And if they want to come and play the guitar in the animal hospital, that's great. I've paid for Weight Watchers for staff members, or just and sometimes that's a rally around for the rest of the team too, because they all decided they would help with her program.
Yes.
She lost 70 pounds.
That's amazing.
So it's a great story, but it's just things that we do for people, and what we can.
Impactful changes, and everybody wins. The organization wins. And it helps morale. It helps that team member. And it also lets people see that you really do care.
Right. Yeah. And that you listen to people, because not everybody wants pizza for lunch.
Right.
I used to go to my sales rep and do not bring that garbage into my hospital. We want healthy food. And I know it's more expensive for you and it's harder for you to make that, but this is what I want my team to be fed well and healthy, because I'm looking after them always. I'm going to look after them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Susan, I know we could talk about this stuff forever. And so let me ask you this. Obviously, you said Stephen Covey fan, but do you have like a favorite book, or like the book you would say this is what you need to read?
I just happen to have it. Right? Since we like money, no, I'm just playing. This one is huge. A must-have.
Is that the Crucial Conversations?
Conversation.
Yes. That is
this book I have used forever, and I go back and read it every 5 years at least, because whatever's going on in my world, I will find a few more pearls that I can apply it to, but it is so influential and helps me with the way of thinking, and and just really being able to master the art of delivery, which I am actually writing a whole big article on. I've been writing it for 5 years. So I've got it finished, but it's huge, you
Yeah.
know, and so just everything about that book is amazing to me, you know.
Absolutely. I 1000% agree. It
Mhm,
is my number one recommended book. And
mhm.
I've talked to so many people about that book. I've shown it. If I showed you my copy, it's highlighted, red line, dog,
Yes.
page turned down, the back is bent. It is a well-loved and well-used book. But if everybody on earth read that book,
Right?
oh my
The
gosh,
world would be better. The
we,
world would be so much better.
oh yeah, we would have no war. We would have no,
Right.
we wouldn't have need for these things because people would understand why people do
Yes.
what they do and how, what they're doing is triggering what
Yes.
is going on in just, oh my gosh, just incredible book.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yeah.
lot of science behind it because I also read a lot about neuroscience and
Mhm.
fear. And I think the other thing too is like I'm fear-free certified. And if you're fear-free certified, there's
Mhm.
so many parallels between
Yes.
crucial conversations and fear-free certification. And I try to teach a lot of those skill sets with animal behavior parallels
That's really
because
good. Yeah.
we are animals at the top of the food chain. So if we
Yes.
understand that why the dog is trying to bite us, we also understand why the human is trying to scream at us.
Right.
And it's because it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
It
It
is. It is. It really is. That's so right. You're exactly right.
Mhm. Yeah, you see those little technician light bulbs going off, going like, oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right. And
Right.
then you go pet
Exactly.
the dog that's trying to eat you up. No, then leave the
Mhm.
human alone too. Don't push them.
Mhm.
You got to ride
Mhm.
along. That one is good. And the other one I love is called Talking to Crazy. It
Oh,
is,
I haven't read that yet.
oh, that one's a good one too. It's written by a psychiatrist and it's talking about hyperreactive people and how you manage them
Yes.
when they have truly gone off the rails. And so that's another one of my favorites is
Oh,
crucial
I
talk.
need to read that.
Yeah. The link
I'm
I
a
think is on my website. So
Okay.
you can find it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, as always, it's so much fun having a conversation with you. And I know you've got
Mhm.
a deadline, and because you told me I've got a hard stop because I have a meeting to go to, so I don't want to respect your time. But
Thank you.
um, we're going to put how to get in touch with you in the show notes and your bio, and if you have any other favorite books or words of
Mhm.
wisdom, or if you wanted to shout out to someone who was a mentor to you, then we're happy to have those comments attached too. um, I encourage everyone to listen to Susan's wisdom and really look at servant leadership for your hospitals if
Mhm.
you want to make your life easier as a manager.
Mhm.
This is the key. This is how
Mhm.
you do it. You really empower your team. You learn to delegate, you trust, you verify, and you serve your people well, and they'll just take the reins and do it.
Mhm. They will. They're amazing. I've just been so privileged to work with so many people, and it's so flattering because I have 4 people here in the Atlanta market that wherever I'm working, that's where they want to work, you know. But I always tell them for full transparency, I always say, you get the job because I never want to, favoritism is a thing. So you get the job, you earn the job, and I'll see you when you get there.
There you go. Yeah. There you
You
go.
know?
There you go. All right. Well, thank you everyone again for listening to this episode of The Bend. This will be available on our YouTube channel. And also we are splitting out the audio. So it's available on podcast on Podbean. So you can listen to it however you prefer. Again, my name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host today for this episode of The Bend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.